105.7 FM. We are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. And now, once again, we get great audio here in Kansas City of people standing down on the plaza, protesting Donald Trump, protesting Elon Musk, and frankly, not sounding like they know what they're talking about. I watched every local TV news package on this over the weekend into early this morning. And I sat there and I thought to myself, gosh, if I could go out and pick people from a crowd of a couple hundred folks and use them to actually benefit what I think is smart policy, what I think is good policy on behalf of the American people, these are the individuals I would use. So thank you to, first off, Channel 9, KMBC, finding some outstanding, tongue-in-cheek, residents around Kansas City who are clearly out of touch with what is happening in the moment as they protested down on the plaza on Saturday for what they called the hands-off protests and rallies that happen not just in Kansas City, but all over the country. And here's what it sounded like.
They say the issues are too many for signage.
I'm worried about our kids. I'm worried about their education.
I'm really nervous for the people that have less money.
Democracy is what it's all about.
There's too much.
Worried about the kids, worried about education. Democracy is what it's all about. Yeah, we did this whole democracy thing on November 5th, and the results were the results. And I know that that may be an inconvenient truth for some of you, but we did do that whole thing like 4 months ago. And that's why the people who are in power right now remain in power. Now, there will be a chance for you to remedy what you believe to be a poor selection by the American people come next year. But, trust me, we did this whole democracy thing. Technically, I know someone's going to text and be like, Constitutional Republic, just wanted to remind you. Thank you. Yes, thank you from the back row. Very much appreciate that. You get the point. We voted. And for many of us, we knew exactly what was coming. When it came to DOGE, when it came to cuts to the federal government, the lack of sustainability of federal government growth over the last 4 years was going to drive us off of the fiscal cliff, was going to ruin the nation. And now we are trying to fix some of that and roll some of these numbers back when it comes to federal jobs and others to 2019 levels. That's it. That's the goal here. Just roll some of these numbers back to where they were 6 years ago. But the protesters are out there on the plaza on Saturday, and frankly, most of them had no idea what they were there for.
It's under attack right now.
Others say they wanted to be here to protest the latest rounds of tariffs. They say this last week has hit Americans hard, especially those that count on the retirement.
My parents have lost all of their 401k. They have to start.
Wait. Your parents lost all of their 401k? Says woke Karen. What were they invested in? That they just lost all of their 401k. I mean, yeah, I'm not looking forward to looking at the 401k today. But what is she talking about there,
Well,
John?
they lost their 402k as well. So, they're double.
Yeah.
All over again, and they're nearing 70.
It has decreased my particular 401ks by at least 20%. So that's the money I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to recover.
I know you probably are going to be shocked by this, but that gentleman talking to Channel 9 was probably give or take 70 years old. If you are 70 and you are riding the stock market and riding equities right now, that's on you there, Bob, old Bob boy. You should not be 70 years old riding the ebbs and the flows of the stock market right now. I'm not Mark Falter, okay? I'm not pretending to be Mark Falter, our buddy at the Retirement Income Hour. But I know this much. If I'm 70 and I'm retired, I am not sitting here saying, dang it, the markets are down 20% and now my net worth is off 20%. The whole point is to be in a place where you're reallocated and not worrying about the ebbs and the flows of the stock market. Like someone like me in my, mid-30s, I can sit here and just say, oh, man, that stinks. But, hey, if you don't sell it, you haven't lost any money. That's the other part of this that needs to be factored into the equation. And if you're like this guy and you're 70, it's like, bro, what are you doing? Call up our buddy Falter. Take care of it. That's a bad strategy. And that's on you, my man.
Hands-off group lining every corner on the plaza for hours. They say nationally, this is the only way to get their message heard.
We're not sure how to get the message across. Every day we contemplate what can we do.
I've got 2 daughters and a son, and I want them to have the same rights that I have today.
It's important that people show up and say that what's happening is not okay.
I think we need to be out here and we need to say what's on our mind, because this is our country too.
On the plaza, Alan Shield, KBC 9 News.
Woke white lady stands on the plaza wondering if her 2 children will have the same rights that she has today. Where do you make this stuff up? Is this why you took off late last week, John? Were you prepping for your... Did you have to get
signs?
Okay,
all
right. You had to finally pick out an outfit for the big protests this weekend? Is that what it was about?
Once again, there were so many, I couldn't decide what to wear.
Happens every time.
We had one on the jail. We've got one on Doge. What else? Is probably the Tesla one's still going on. I haven't checked the schedule.
I'm sure.
The Sporting KC manager, which they won this weekend.
All right.
So that worked out.
All right. Very well done. So we had protests far and wide across Kansas City this weekend, according to all you guys. And I know it's tough to pick and choose which ones you want to go to, right? The good news for me, when you got 3 little kids, you don't have time for this crap. You got like real life things to worry about.
We'll do the one on the plaza because we can get lunch after,
yes,
right?
That's right.
Nobody goes out to Tesla, where you got McDonald's and Popeyes.
Yeah. You could walk a little bit further, go to our buddy Jasper's, but
but that's a hoof.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. These people are not big on getting their steps in, I don't think.
No.
That's right. 913-408-7957. Pete, I'm 60. And I still see this downturn in the markets as a buying opportunity. Oh, trust me, it can be. Listen, if you know what you're doing, absolutely, you can make a lot of money right now. I'm not sitting here celebrating the market being down. Nobody is, right? But this is a broader conversation. And here's the biggest problem for these protesters down on the plaza. They're not protesting one thing. They don't have a unifying message. It's just like whatever the anti-Trump narrative is of the moment that they're latching onto. But that's the fascinating part to me. You listen to all these protesters in that Channel 9 package I just played, and they all have these different things that don't really have any meaning. Some are tariffs. Some are, I hope my kids have the same rights as me, which is just made up gobbledygook. You got everybody down there with like a different cause. And here's the only theme. The theme is Orange Man bad. That's the theme. And God bless them. It's America. It's their First Amendment right. I'm just sitting here and saying, if you're trying to persuade people, and that's the goal of these, right? The goal is to create enthusiasm amongst their base going into next year. You've got midterms, everything else. And create the narrative and create the storyline that people who maybe did vote for Donald Trump are turning on him, or there's this grassroots enthusiasm against this administration. That's what it is. And then, of course, the media covers it. They use the media to further that narrative. And then people see this and say, oh, gosh, wow, look at all this massive amount of enthusiasm against Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Doge, but they don't have a message. There is no message. The message is what it's always been and what it will continue to be. And that isn't to say that Democrats cannot win the midterms. Frankly, I would put money on them, doing pretty well right now, probably taking back the House because history would suggest that's what ends up happening when one party has all the power. But my goodness, it's not what they're making it out to be right now. When you look at local news and you look at some of these protests, these hands-off protests that took place in 50 states around the country, including down on the plaza. 913-408-7957. Now, what is President Trump saying ahead of the markets opening up later this morning? Thursday and Friday were bloodbaths in the stock market. The president has a new statement out, and you do not want to miss what direction he is taking this thing next on 95.7 FM and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
If it's happening in KCMO, it's on KCMO 95.7 FM. Here's Pete Mundo.
25 minutes ago, the President of the United States put out a statement here on his Truth Social. Of course, the market set a brutal couple of days, Thursday and Friday. The Dow implied open. The futures are right now down about 600 points. So when the futures opened up last night, they were off about 1,500. So the futures are rallying, and the open is not anticipated to be nearly as ugly as we thought it might be when we went to sleep last night. But the president writing here, oil prices are down, interest rates are down. And then he puts in parentheses, the slow-moving Fed should cut rates. That's a little message to his buddy there, Jerome Powell. Food prices are down. There is no inflation, and the long-time abused USA is bringing billions of dollars a week from the abusing countries on tariffs that are already in place. This despite the fact that the biggest abuser of them all, China, whose markets are crashing, just raised its tariff by 34%. On top of its long-term ridiculously high tariffs, plus, exclamation point in parentheses, not acknowledging my warning for abusing countries not to retaliate. They've made enough for decades, taking advantage of the good old USA, writes President Trump. Our past leaders are to blame for allowing this and so much else to happen to our country. Make America great again. That's what he said there.
Such a nice man.
That was just now on Truth Social from the President of the United States. Oil prices down, interest rates are down, and there is no inflation. That's the message this morning from President Trump. Markets set to open up in a couple hours in the red, but not as ugly as it was expected to be as of late last night. So how is the president reacting to obviously a historically bad run for the markets? Well, he was on Air Force One last night. He spoke to the media, and he basically said, hold on to your hat. I am not changing course right now. And frankly, even though I think a lot of us are looking at this and saying, how is this going to play out? That is the right thing to do right now. You cannot show your hand. Trump can't stand up there in front of the world on Air Force One and say, oh, boy, I didn't see this coming. These markets are really jittery, more than I expected. He can't show weakness right now. I mean, he has had this economic vision for 40 years. He's now implementing it. He believes it's going to help build up and reestablish a middle class in this country. That's why he's doing it, okay? He's not doing it for his rich buddies. Now, you can get rich trading this market, but he's not doing it to make wealthy people wealthier. That's not the goal here. So when he's asked last night on Air Force One about, pain for the markets, well, in classic Trump fashion, here's what he said.
Pain in the market. At some point, you're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump put. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I don't want anything to go down. But sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. And we have such a horrible, we have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen. They took our businesses, they took our money, they took our jobs, they moved it to Mexico, they moved it to Canada, they moved a lot of it to China, and it's not sustainable. We're not going to do it. Now we have hundreds of billions of dollars is pouring into our country. On a monthly basis, it's pouring, it's already started because they put tariffs on. And eventually it's going to straighten out and our country will be solid and strong again.
So Trump's not going to get up there and say, yeah, he's not going to say either of these two things. One, yeah, the market's going down. I love that. Or two, yeah, these markets have me kind of concerned about my economic policy. As only Donald Trump can, with a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face, he goes, I think your question is so stupid.
She's a real beauty.
That's what he says. And then he goes on to explain why he's doubling down on this. And frankly, as much as I'm kind of sitting here, I think many of us are, seeing whether or not this can work, we know that he is trying to reestablish a middle class that has been hollowed out in America for decades now. Is this the best way to go about doing it? I don't know. But I know the intentions are right. And I also know what the other guy did over the last 4 years did nothing but destroy the middle class. I do know that Joe Biden's policies from 21 to January of 25 did nothing but goose the equity markets, make the wealthy much wealthier, and then also try to build up a working poor that was super reliant on the government because their wages were not keeping up with inflation. So under that administration, the goal was to create this very wealthy upper class and a poor, increasingly poor section of the country that needed the government to then create a monopoly for his own political party that potentially could never lose. And Trump's saying, we're not doing that. We're going to try to bring back some middle class wealth here to this country. If we want to remain a robust country, we need a robust middle class. Will this work? That remains to be seen. Stephen in Kansas City, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete, I know it's not very Christ-like, but boy, it's kind of fun to hear all these socialist boomers from back in the 60s whining on the plaza about their 401k when they're in their 70s. Let me play amateur Charlie Gasparino here. I'm with you 100%. I think what's going on here, and Netanyahu and Vietnam have already capitulated along with 50 out of 150 countries, and they say they want no tariffs, which is something that's not being reported. I think this gambit is what's going to be happening. Is he's waiting for all these countries now to come to him and say, we're going to reduce tariffs on our own. We're not going to wait for our country, our other countries to do something. So whether this will work, I think it's all negotiation. I think it's all flexible. And I think it's 1/3 of the way working so far. And if people got to take the hit out of it, the super rich have got to take a hit that have hollowed out this country via manufacturing, then it kind of feels good to let them do it. I mean, it kind of feels good to let them feel the pain that we all have felt. But that's my take. I think this is all.
Well, not bad. Not bad when it comes to amateur Charlie Gasparino. Not bad there, Stephen. Nice job, buddy. Have a good day.
All right. Take care.
We'll get to more of this. 913-408-7957. Your reaction, plus what's to come tomorrow in Kansas City that you don't want to miss next.
Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Stick around. I'm coming up at 10 o'clock right after Pete Mundo on KCMO 95.7 FM.
Kevin will be walking into the show, and the markets will be in full swing. So we are obviously monitoring what could be another historic day in the markets after Friday was just an absolute bloodbath. Dow closing off more than 2,000 points. But, of course, as has been discussed extensively over the last couple of days, and listen, we've talked about it on this show for years now. Wall Street is not Main Street. The stock market is not the main indicator of the economy. If it was the main indicator of the economy, Kamala Harris would have cackled her way into the White House. That did not happen, thank goodness.
God save the Queen, man.
Okay? So if everybody voted based on the stock market, this country would look a lot different today than it does right now. That's a fact. It's not an opinion. That's a fact. But remember, the top 10% of Americans hold 88% of the equities. The goal here, though, is to not redistribute wealth, right? It's not to say, we've got to give somebody else's shares of Apple to somebody else. It's not like right-wing socialism. It's just to say and make the point very clear and very obvious that, yes, we want the stock market to go up, but the stock market is not the indicator of the economic strength for 90% of this country. It is for 10% that own 90% of the equity markets. But for 90% of Americans, it's not irrelevant, but we want to get them to a place where they are growing their share of equities. That's the kind of economy that you want to try to create. You want to allow all Americans to experience the wealth that can be generated from the stock market. And we don't have that right now. It doesn't exist. Scott Besson talked about this over the weekend. The top 10% of Americans own 88% of the equity markets. 40% owns the other 12%. The bottom 50% have nothing. Absolutely nothing. 913-4087-957. Let's say hi to Walter in Spring Hill. Go ahead, Walter. You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And we've been doing this for decades, and the middle class has basically been decimated. So why not give President Trump's plan a try? It can't be any worse for the middle class than it has been the last at least 2 decades that I'm aware of. So why not?
And that's where I think a lot of people are at right now. No one's doing cartwheels, thank you, Walter, because the markets are doing what they've done the last couple of days. But when you look at the longevity of the country, and frankly, if you're a Republican voter and you voted for Trump and now you're maybe like on the fence because of all this, if you care about the future of the party cannot be outflanking Democrats with the wealthy, with the highly educated. They are growing that base. The more time people spend in college, the further left they're going to be. And it does seem like now the more money people make and the more wealth they have, it's also more likely they are going to lean the other way. So if you want to see the party thrive, if you want to see that big tent party grow from November, where you saw people shifting to the right amongst urban Americans, Black Americans, Latino Americans, working class Americans who are white, Asian, Latino, and Black, if you want to see that party grow, well, you can't just do the same old thing. You just can't. And then wonder, gosh, why did we get our clocks cleaned in the midterms? You can't do it. A lot of these things are things that Trump talked about on the campaign trail. None of them are all that big a surprise. Do we want to see the markets do what they've done? No, nobody wants that. No one's like cheering that on. But it was always a potential for this to happen based on the policy disruptions that Trump was talking about and now he has implemented. And if it works, well, guess what? He's going to set up his own political party for a generation to come. If it doesn't, then 2026 in the midterms will be ugly. But it's way too early to tell whether or not this is going to work. Steve in KCK. What's up, Steve? You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete, you're a finance guy. Maybe you can tell me this. Tariffs seem to be working for China okay, and they seem to be working for India and the EU, and the rest of the world seems to be doing okay off tariffs. But now that America is going to reciprocate, now all of a sudden it's a bad thing and markets are crashing. It's like, why is it a bad thing when America implements tariffs, but the rest of the world doesn't? It's okay.
Well, listen, I think Wall Street's acting like a teenage girl, to be honest. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. And I also think that this is an excuse for some of the big money people and the hedge funds and things like that to sell out, right? To get out and to maybe buy in at a better price point. So I think there's a lot of that going on. I think there's an overreaction. But the reality is, too, it is easier for those countries to have the tariffs in place that they have because, they've got a lot of this cheap labor, a lot of this cheap manufacturing over there. And, they're not obviously importing from the United States what we are importing from them when it comes to, the types of consumer goods and services that, frankly, this country finds itself way too addicted to, which is cheap labor from China that brings in cheap goods that we all sadly buy on Amazon and Target and Walmart and all these different places. I mean, it's not good. I admit that we do it, but it's not good.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have – you can't call it free trade until there are no tariffs. Right now it's cost trade.
Yeah. No, listen, thank you, Steve. And I think that is something that Trump would like to get to, truly free trade. Now, I don't know if he wants that with China. Frankly, I don't think he does. I don't think he actually just wants to create a zero tariff environment with China. That's just my hunch, my guess. But I think with certain countries, he would say, hey, let's just take the tariffs off the board for all of us here. I think that Trump believes there's money to be made from China on tariffs. But with some of these smaller countries where we have, a lot of our manufacturing come in, Thailand, Vietnam, places like that, I think he's basically just looking for no tariffs across the board. That's what he's looking for.
So no Trump towers at the Great Wall or anything?
No,
I don't, casino there?
I don't think that's part of the plan.
Yeah.
I think we're waiting on maybe, the Gaza Strip Trump Tower first before we start looking at the Great Wall of Trump.
There we go.
That's my guess. Now, tomorrow in Kansas City is a big day. You're going to be going to the polls on a jail tax, and you'll also be going to the polls in Kansas City to approve, potentially, a $474 million bond measure for the Kansas City Public Schools. The plan, of course, is to use that money for facility upgrades and the construction of 2 new schools. But as our good friend Patrick Toohey at the Show Me Institute wrote in the Kansas City Star, the district claims the money is needed for facility upgrades and the construction of 2 new schools. But taxpayers should ask themselves, has the Kansas City Public Schools earned the public's trust? The numbers tell a troubling story. High spending, dismal results, and a pattern of misleading voters on school finances. If passed, this bond would cost the average homeowner more than $120 per year, on top of already rising property tax bills. For a school district that has not demonstrated responsible spending, that's a steep price for families struggling with affordability in Kansas City. It's really as simple as this. Is it worth it to increase housing costs for poor families to fund a school district in KCPS that has utterly failed? Failed its children, failed its residents, failed the parents of those children. Now, my gut tells me that it will pass because there's no one really lobbying against this publicly. You've got the mayor saying, go out there and vote yes on these school bonds tomorrow. You've got a lot of, union enthusiasm, obviously, on the vote yes side. Don't you care about the kids? This stuff usually passes. But if there's ever a year when voters might say, I'm tapped out, I'm done, I'm not voting on this, and by the way, KCPS, you have done nothing to earn this. You have nothing to show that you deserve more money from working Kansas Cityans for your public schools that have been an utter failure for decades now? If there's ever a year that people might surprise the establishment, it could be tomorrow in Kansas City. We'll have more on this coming up throughout the morning on KCMO. I will share my buddy Patrick Tuohy's article that he wrote on this vote coming up tomorrow on my X page at Pete Mundo, and you can see it there. And kudos to the Kansas City Star. I give credit where it's due for allowing him to write this piece as well. Coming up, the 6 at 6. Top 6 stories to know in the 6 o'clock hour. We'll get to it next on 95.7 FM.
You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM.
$6:50. It is great to be back on a Monday morning on KCMO Talk Radio. And we just wrapped up booking Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business Network, for the 8 o'clock hour. Right before the markets open up, Charlie will be here. And at 7:30 this morning, E.J. Antoni, he is an economist with the Heritage Foundation, is going to join us on 95.7 FM. So finalizing things as the show progresses. Of course, this could end up being another historic day for the markets, as we'll be following it all morning long on 95.7 FM. But it is that time of the morning. Let's roll it.
It's time for the 6 at 6 on 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio.
All right, let's start with the markets, of course.
Number one.
Yeah, that's the story right now. Right now, you look at what happened overnight in Japan. And right now, in Japan, their markets closed down 8%. And in mainland China, key indexes closed down as much as 9%. Hong Kong's benchmark, the Hang Seng Index, slumped 13.2% on the day, the biggest one-day drop since 1997, the year that Britain returned the former colony to China, according to Reuters. So Taiwan's index shed nearly 10%, its biggest one-day drop on record. So what you're seeing is an absolute bloodbath for the Asian markets. In early trading in Europe, France and Germany and Britain, their major indexes all down 4 to 6% in the early Monday trading. Right now, the futures here in the U.S., Dow is off 800 points. That's a 2% drop. S&P off 2.5%. And the NASDAQ off nearly 3%, down 500 points on those futures, with the market set to open up at 8:30 this morning.
Number two.
Well, now we got to go to the polls here in Kansas City. Now, the thing is getting a lot of attention. The what's being dubbed the jail tax in Kansas City on the ballot tomorrow. Also, you've got the Kansas City Public School District decide whether or not they should go ahead with $474 million in bonding to improve their schools here in Kansas City. There's also selling parkland to charity on the ballot tomorrow in Kansas City. Independence has general obligation bonds on the ballot tomorrow. In Lee Summit, voters are being asked to approve a $225 million no tax rate increase bond issue. In North Kansas City, Park Hill and Platte County schools, those school districts also looking for bond money tomorrow. And in Liberty, there is a sales tax increase on the ballot tomorrow as well. That's a 1% sales tax. That is serious money. It's a lot of dough. And it's being asked for in Liberty for public safety projects. And then you also have school district races. Kansas City, Lee Summit, North Kansas City, and there is a municipal race in Grandview for mayor. How about that? That is also on the ballot.
Well, I think we actually have a race this year with 2 people in it.
How about that? Wow, that's big stuff out there. Very nice.
Number three.
All right, number three. The hands-off rallies took place over the weekend, and it was exactly what you would have expected. You had a bunch of Karens who showed up on the plaza and were very upset with Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Doge. And it was the blind following the blind. This was part of a 50-state event that happened on Saturday all over the country. All 50 states had what they're calling the hands-off rally. And the point was to say, hands off our, what, government jobs that most of the American people are not partaking in?
Hands off our great-grandchildren's debt.
Yeah, please. Just the name of the rally was just very, very mockable and very easy to goof on. And it was exactly what you would have expected on Saturday. So it was down on the plaza. It was, in New York City, L.A., all over the country. They had these hands-off rallies. And they were funded in part by an organization that George Soros has given millions of dollars to in recent years. I know you are absolutely shocked, aren't you?
Talk about a bombshell.
The same people screaming about billionaires having too much influence in government, meaning Elon Musk, are gladly out there rallying on behalf of events that are funded by George Soros. Please take your hypocrisy and stick it where the sun don't shine. I do not want to hear it anymore.
Number 4.
Well, some sad news that we're sharing with you here on KCMO Talk Radio. Jay North, Dennis the Menace, dead at 73. And this news coming down as Fox News had it here late last night that North died at his home in Lake Butler, Florida, after battling colon cancer for years, according to a social media post shared by his longtime friends. The child actor found acclaim with his role as Dennis Mitchell, and he passes away at the age of 73 years old.
Number 5.
For the 6 at 6, we've got the NCAA Tournament Championship game coming up tonight. It is Houston. It is Florida, a Big 12 SEC matchup. The Houston Cougars with an incredible comeback on Saturday. An 11-1 run to close that game. I almost turned it off on Saturday night, and I am so glad I did not. What a comeback by the Houston Cougars the other night.
You never know what's going to happen with Houston. I saw it at Allen Fieldhouse. They came back in 30 seconds. They did it again on the national stage against Florida.
That's right. That was that big comeback. They were down like 6 with 18 seconds to go or something, and they beat KU at Allen Fieldhouse during the regular season. That is a very good reminder. I forgot about that game there, Mark. So Kelvin Sampson, the head coach for the Cougars, can get his 800th career win if he wins tonight. That is the kind of storybook ending that you cannot script. The comeback against Duke was tremendous, and now he tries to win career win number 800 in the Natty. I am totally all in on Houston tonight. And then let's wrap it up here.
Number 6.
Well, the Royals needed that. They get the series win, beating the Orioles 4-1 yesterday, taking 2 of 3 against Baltimore. After a bit of a rough start to the season, they are now 4-5 overall. And I know the weather wasn't great, but you know what? It's early. They needed that one in front of the home crowd, and they get it done with a 4-1 victory, yesterday over the Orioles, who are also expected to be a playoff team. So there is your 6 at 6 on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Coming up next, when it comes to all the tariffs and all the commotions, Donald Trump has some of his people on the Sunday shows, and they said exactly what we needed to hear. I'll play it next. Well, you got to give the Trump people this. They are not backing down. They are not hiding after a couple of brutal days for the markets on Thursday and Friday. And the Dow futures are right now down 800 points. But they are, talking to anybody and everybody saying, here's why we're doing this. Here's what's going on with these tariffs. And here's where these negotiations stand. And that is exactly what they need to be doing right now. They need to be doubling down on transparency, doubling down on communication. And this is exactly what you got over the weekend. Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett was on ABC this week. Trust me, no friend to the people in charge of the country right now. But they're going on these shows. They are talking to these hosts and talking to these anchors. And Kevin Hassett shared, I believe, some pretty good news that should be welcomed by all Americans.
Got a report from the USTR last night that more than 50 countries have reached out to the president to begin a negotiation. But they're doing that because they understand that they bear a lot of the tariff. And so I don't think that you're going to see a big effect on the consumer in the U.S. because I do think that the reason why we have a persistent long-run trade deficit is these people have very inelastic supply. They've been dumping goods into the country in order to create jobs, say, in China.
And Kevin Hassett is saying, hey, you've got more than 50 countries that reached out to the president to start their negotiation. And Trump was probably taking these calls as he's debating between a 6 and a 7 iron on, the 14th hole, playing golf over the weekend. And guess what? I'm okay with that because he's multitasking. And if he pulls out the 6 iron instead of the 7 and he hits it a little too long over the green, but he gets a deal done with Vietnam, I'll survive. That's all that matters.
Well, he already knows what he's going to do. It's in his mind. He doesn't need to run it by the committees and all this stuff that the left likes to take on. He's just golfing.
Yeah.
He already knows what he wants to do with every single one of them.
That's the amazing part, right? You think about these lifelong bureaucrats who need like 7 committees to come to a conclusion on something. He's running it like a business, like a businessman who's like, I know the number that I want. It's like a negotiation. I know what I'm willing to sell for. This is a very, very rudimentary example. But I'm right now trying to sell a piece of outdoor furniture on Facebook Marketplace, okay? I know what my price point is. I can get a message at any point. People are offering me $100 less, $200 less. I'm like, no, I know what my number is. Trump knows what his number is on these tariffs. He knows what he's willing to get to with some of these countries. So it's not really of interest to me where exactly he's taking the call from, as long as they're calling. All right? I mean, unlike the last guy who was comatose, hobbling along the beaches of Delaware, you know what? We can do 2 things at once around here. Now you've got Scott Bessent, who is the Treasury Secretary. He goes on Meet the Press. And he made one of the more important points that needed to be made to Kristen Welker of Meet the Press. So once again, you've got these top Trump administration officials who are going on to some very unfriendly programs yesterday and making the case for why they're doing what they're doing, knowing full well they are not going to get the benefit of the doubt. Scott Bessent Meet the Press yesterday on prices and what he's expecting to see here in the weeks and potentially months ahead.
Kristen, what I like is data. And if we look at data from President Trump's first term, and there's a big study that just came out from a group of economists, mostly at MIT, that showed that a 20% tariff on China led to a 0.7% tax or price level increase over 4 years. I think that's pretty good. If we can take in 20% in tariffs and it's a 0.7% increase. And Kristen, the little publicized story this week, everyone wants to look at the stock market going down. You know what else went down? Oil prices went down almost 15% in 2 days, which impacts working Americans much more than the stock market does. Interest rates hit their low for the year, so I'm expecting the mortgage applications to pick up.
Well, just to be very clear, though, I mean, during President Trump's first terms, the cost to Americans was nearly $80 billion in new taxes due to his tariffs. The prices did go up on everything from washing machines to tires.
Well, no. But let's go back. The aggregate number was 0.7, so we can discern the individual things. Also, households saw real net wages go up. So if wages go up faster than prices, which is not what happened over the past 4 years, that's why the bottom 50% got eviscerated.
That was Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, on Meet the Press yesterday. And that was a number I did not know. Their 20% tariff on China from the first Trump administration, that, let's be very clear, the Biden administration kept in place, led to a 0.7% price increase over 4 years. That is pretty good. Now, China at that point was largely willing to basically subsidize the tariffs. Are they going to be willing to do that now for the future as the trade war picks up? I don't know. But Scott Bessent at least has some data to look at instead of just the hysterics of, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, we're all going to die. The markets are having a really bad couple of days here. Now, oil prices down, that also can be a good thing for regular folks. It also can be a bad thing, right? That can be potentially a sign of a recession. We saw that in, 2008, 2009. If it means that less people are going to be driving, less people are going to be traveling, airlines, whatever it might be, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is a broad win for the economy, but it does bring some relief as oil drops to under $60 a barrel. So that's what they're looking at right now. And Donald Trump is also playing the game and doubling down on the constituency that got him elected. And that's not Wall Street. Wall Street has backed the Democrat the last 3 elections when it comes to voting and donations, overwhelmingly, going back to 2016 with Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris. So their hysterics have to be taken with a grain of salt here. They just have to be, based on where their allegiance has been politically over the last 10 years or so. It doesn't mean that we want 401ks to go in the toilet, but we are also not going to determine the health of an economy based on the Dow Jones or the S&P or the NASDAQ. Because all you then do, and all we saw happen the last 4 years, is the wealth gap expand between the haves and the have-nots as we printed trillions of dollars that we did not have, that we could not afford to print, and basically create a very frothy equity market that the regular person has no share of. And you would think that even those who didn't vote for Donald Trump could understand that part of it and would be willing to understand that part of it. You would think that that would be a part of the equation. That even if you didn't vote for the guy, you could say, okay, I see what he's going for there. I've got concerns, but I see what he's going for there. Now they've doubled down on being the party of Wall Street. The Occupy Wall Street movement is now the party of Wall Street. Donald Trump says, let's try to build up our middle class and try to bring back as many jobs as we can to this country. And the same people who are screaming about $15 an hour at McDonald's are now suddenly like, no, I like my cheap labor in China. You see, they've got themselves twisted into such a pretzel, and they've really made their entire movement about basically being against whatever Trump is doing, even if it's antithetical to a lot of their own beliefs over the last couple of decades. They just look like a party that is flailing in the wind right now. But Trump ultimately has to have success here. That's what's got to happen. And I am more than willing to give him a shot on this. I've got his back because what we've been doing now for the better part of a generation, basically my entire life, certainly my adult life, has not helped us build a robust middle class in this country. 7:15, EJ Antoni, he's an economist with the Heritage Foundation. He will be here at 7:30 on KCMO. Charlie Gasparino has been all over this over the weekend with some great reporting out of Wall Street and from top Trump advisors and top executives. He's going to be on the show at 8:05. Coming up next, the Kansas City Star had a piece on the future of one of the most important positions in our region. And I'm sad to report that despite their reporting, I believe race will be a factor here. I will tell you what that is next on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
Dave Ramsey here, and you're listening to Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio, now airing on FM at 95.7.
Okay, for the first time ever, I am a little nervous actually now because Jim Cramer of CNBC came out this morning and he said now is not the time to panic. So now is definitely the time to panic because there's always the inverse Cramer rule here. Jim Cramer has made a living being wrong about like most things. He was the guy who was like, buy Lehman Brothers back in September of 2008. So there's literally accounts on X that are called inverse Cramer. Just do whatever the guy tells you not to do and you'll make a ton of money in the markets. So I say this very much tongue in cheek, but Jim Cramer telling me not to panic this morning is actually potentially the panic button that I might need. I'm just kidding. We're all good here. Stay the course. Let's see what happens today. E.J. Antoni of the Heritage Foundation coming up in 10 minutes. He's an economist with them, does a great job. And we just booked Charlie Gasparino of Fox Business. He has had a lot of conversations over the weekend with Trump officials, with Wall Street hotshots, and he will join us right before the markets open up at the start of the 8 o'clock hour here on KCMO Talk Radio. Now, in Kansas City, we know that this city needs a new city manager. And I believe the city is potentially going to make a major mistake here in how they handle this. So the Kansas City Star reported over the weekend that the process to hire a new city manager is going to take weeks and not months. The city will not hire a consultant to conduct a time-consuming nationwide search, as it did when Brian Platt was hired in 2020. Now, this is the right move, but they're going to screw it up, I believe. There's no need to waste money on an outside consultant right now because what's likely to happen is when the city council turns over in 2 years, you know and I know there's going to be a new mayor, and oftentimes that mayor is going to want to have their own city manager in charge. So this may be a short-term city manager role, so there's no point in wasting a lot of money on hiring a consultant to then do a nationwide search to hire a city manager. So I'm fine with them doing that part of it and doing it that way. But my fear is that they're going to use race to make this hire. Why? Well, there has been angst amongst some in Kansas City about Brian Platt not being a person of color since he got the job in 2020. We have emails from one city council member in particular, Melissa Robinson, who expressed her disappointment back in 2020 that Brian Platt was a white man and got the job as city manager. That is in email. It did not get nearly the amount of reporting in local media that it should have gotten. We reported it. I have the email of a city council member being upset that the city hired somebody based on their skin color, or that the city hired somebody and her disappointment was because of that individual's skin color. I mean, if that was the other way around, you know and I know, that would be a headline story in this town for weeks. But of course, if you say I'm upset that the white guy got hired, well, you know, you sweep it right under the rug. So what's going on right now is there is an interim city manager. Her name is Kimiko Gilmore. I don't know if she's good or bad at her job. I have no idea. But here's the problem when you support hiring processes based on race. What it does is it actually hurts somebody of color. It hurts that person because then you have a percentage of people who are going to say, is this person only in this job because of their skin color? That's why DEI hiring practices are actually failures, top to bottom. They hurt the people they're intended to help because then some people are going to say, is this person only in their role because of their background? And that's unfair to that person as well. And if you think that they're going to go from white city manager to black interim city manager and then go out there and hire somebody else who is not a person of color, you're kidding yourself. You know that and I know that. I mean, that's not how this is going to go based on how race has been involved in this process, going back now 4+ years to the hiring of Brian Platt. So whether they say it or not, race will play a role. The mayor won't admit it. The city council won't admit it because, of course, that's illegal, but it will play a role. E.J. Antoni is going to be here. He's an economist with the Heritage Foundation on where the markets go from here. They're opening up in 1 hour, and the tariff drama all with him next.
from the nation's heartland. It's Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
Well, all eyes, of course, are on the economy this week, the markets as well. E.J. Antoni does an awesome job, an economist with the Heritage Foundation, joining us on 95.7 FM. He wrote a really good piece at Fox News late last week. And in this, he wrote, Trump's Liberation Day will create a golden age for workers. E.J., good morning. Thanks for being here in Kansas City. What's the premise behind that headline from your piece last week?
Well, the premise is essentially that we were supposed to get reciprocal tariffs last week, and that was going to essentially force other countries to the table. In other words, we tell them, look, we're just going to do to you what you've been doing to us. If you have tariffs and non-tariff barriers on our products, so maybe that includes things like quotas, maybe it includes currency manipulation, whatever the case may be, all of these different things, if you do that to us, we're going to do it to you. And the idea there is that'll force countries to drop all of those barriers to trade. And now our exporters can have better access to foreign markets. Here's the problem, though. That's not what we got last week.
Yeah, so now take me through what your concerns are now, a few days after the tariff plan has been rolled out.
Well, the biggest concern is that what was billed as being reciprocal tariffs, again, this whole idea of we're going to do to you what you've been doing to us, kind of like an economic version of the golden rule, I suppose. Instead of that, we got these made-up equations, quite frankly, where the math just doesn't add up here. We claim that certain countries have certain tariff rates on us, but in reality, if you read through the appendix, as it were, there is no such math there. Instead, all they did was they just looked at the trade deficit, and they didn't even look at the total trade deficit with some of these countries. They only looked at products and not services. So, for example, let's say I'm just taking a random country here, but let's say we buy $1 billion of Swiss watches from Switzerland, and we sell them $2 billion in financial services. That's a trade surplus for us on net, except according to this math, that counts that as a deficit, and it slaps Switzerland with a big penalty.
Okay, so when you look at this from a long game perspective, I've seen a lot of that criticism on that formula that was put out by the White House last week. If this is all just part of negotiating, is that something that I guess makes you potentially feel better about where this is headed, even if that formula was faulty in the way that it was rolled out?
It actually makes me feel worse from a negotiating standpoint for two reasons. One, it's the fact that you will have nations where they don't even have any barriers to trade, except we just slap penalty or punitive tariff rates on them. What do they have to negotiate? They can't lower any barriers to trade. So it's difficult to see how that helps anyone. The other problem is that we are essentially driving nations into China's orbit right now, which is the exact opposite of what we want. This is supposed to be America first, not America boxed out, and that's unfortunately what we're doing here. Instead of China, for example, having just a middle of the road penalty rate, they should have the highest rate. Nobody manipulates trade the way they do, whether it's utilizing slave labor or putting tariffs in place or using quotas or currency manipulation. I mean, I could go on and on, but China's the number one offender here.
So you want to see the tariff rates even higher because they were increased, 34%. You want to see China far and away getting hit with the highest rate and then everything else just much lower than it currently is?
That would be pretty close to reality, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Because again, if we actually look at how are these different nations around the world treating us, it doesn't matter if it's China or Germany or Japan, whatever the case may be. Let's actually have reciprocal trade here. Let's really do the hard work and the math of looking at tariffs and non-tariff barriers around the world. And from there, let's decide who should and who shouldn't have these high and low rates. And I can already tell you, looking at several of our very, very good trading partners, that they should have little to no tariffs because they don't have any barriers to trade. China has the most barriers to trade, and so they should have the highest rate. Again, not a middle-of-the-road rate.
Mm-hmm. E.J. Antoni is here, Heritage Foundation economist on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio. So, listen, there's a lot of economists, folks that you know very well, who are in President Trump's orbit. What have you been hearing from them? Because there's a lot of free traders, of course, that have been around Donald Trump. I mean, Steve Moore and a lot of folks, folks who are on this show all the time. What have you talked to them about over the last couple of days in terms of what's gone on and what may happen going forward?
There's a lot of disappointment, I think. Again, we were promised one thing. We were promised reciprocal trade. And that's what the president said he was going to deliver. And I think he's been let down. This seems to be the general consensus, getting back to your question. It seems like his advisors really let him down here. They told him we were going to get reciprocal tariffs, and instead they produced a product that is nothing of the sort. And so, again, that's not to say this is a total disaster that can't be salvaged, but we got to do the hard work of figuring out what would these reciprocal rates actually look like, and that needs to be what gets put in place. All this market turmoil we're seeing right now, the futures did not just plummet as soon as this announcement was made. The first thing they said was we're going to get a 10% across the board rate, and futures markets actually rallied a little bit. But then when they started showing these crazy charts with these made up numbers, that's when things really went south.
Is there a person, an advisor that you think is responsible for maybe some of the misguided ways that the tariffs have been implemented thus far?
Well, when I see Navarro and Lutnick get on TV and do some of their interviews, it definitely seems like they have some culpability here. And maybe I'm misreading things. I don't know either of those two men personally. In fact, I've never met either of them. So I'm just going off of the information everyone else has, which is what we see in public, what we see on TV, right? But it does seem like there is a disconnect between some of the things those folks are saying and reality. And since one is running the Commerce Department and the other is running trade, I have to imagine they had a very, very heavy hand in this.
So what do you think needs to happen here when it comes to the goal, which is rebuilding a middle class in this country, and how you go about doing it in a fairly efficient way, knowing that, of course, in American politics, time is never on your side? What would that ideally look like, EJ and Tony?
Well, we got to get this tax bill done. This what they did with all these tariffs before having the deregulation done and the tax cuts done and the other pro-growth agenda items. What they did essentially was they took the drowning middle class and they threw an anchor to them before building the boat. And so this is only going to make things worse. It's imperative that they get the tax cut across the finish line and that they do it as soon as possible. That has a lot of different moving parts. I get it. One really great thing they can do there, though, would be to take this 10% tariff and turn that into what they call a border adjustment tax and put that into statute. And what that would do is actually generate probably about $600 billion, and you could use that to offset income taxes. In other words, you could get rid of about $600 billion worth of income taxes for the American middle class by making that swap. That things like that would be a great move. But again, they got to move quick if they're going to counteract the negative effects from this tariff policy.
So, EJ, as you look at the week ahead, then what are you keeping an eye on when it comes to how this tariff and these trade wars play out, and what you think needs to happen to basically solve this thing as quickly as possible? As I stare at your buddy Peter Navarro, who was just on CNBC a few minutes ago, by the way.
Oh boy. Look, I think we got to keep an eye on the White House. I hear a lot of rumors about countries apparently coming to the table to negotiate in order to get these rates down. But I'm also hearing rumblings that's not true. So it's like, all right, what are you supposed to believe, right? Unless you're in the room, you don't know. So take everything you hear with a grain of salt, but do keep your eyes and your ears on the White House in the weeks ahead for developments here. We really got to hope that some negotiations get done and that this gets resolved, either to get rid of these rates or to reevaluate their methodology so that we actually have reciprocal tariffs, because that's what we want. We want reciprocal trade. We don't want less free trade. We want more free trade. The problem that we've had, getting back to your question of how do we rebuild the middle class, the problem has been government getting in the way, either our government regulating business out of existence and driving factories overseas, or foreign governments regulating trade so that our exporters, so that our workers can't sell their products in foreign markets. We want free trade, and we want it to the nth degree possible.
All right. EJ Antoni, Heritage Foundation. Appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for the insight as always. And it's going to be a crazy week to watch unfold. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. EJ Antoni, Heritage Foundation on KCMO. At 8:05, Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business Network, will be here. He has been all over this from a reporting perspective over the weekend, talking to Trump officials, talking to Wall Street folks about how the markets could end up playing out in the days and weeks ahead, and frankly, what the end game is here for the White House. So Charlie Gasparino at 8:05, 20 minutes away on KCMO. The good, the bad, and the ugly from the weekend we will get to coming up next.
Stream Mundo in the morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
It's a Monday morning at 7:50. That means one thing. Let's go.
It's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly on KCMO Talk Radio. Now on 95.7 FM.
I don't know if I've ever had this as a good, but I got an email from a listener that I want to share with you that I will make the good here on KCMO Talk Radio. And it reads as follows here. It reads as follows when it says, "Hi, Pete. I just started my second season working at the legendary local institution," and I will save the name to not share it on the air, but it's a nursery here in the Kansas City area. And this individual goes on to write to me. His name is Dan, and he says, "This past Saturday, a group of us nursery sales folks were starting off our day, checking out the current stock of hydrangeas and azaleas and whatnot. And one of my colleagues starts muttering something about a musty moo-moo. You muster moo-moo-moo. And after that, my colleague and I were rolling on the floor making fun of Emmanuel Cleaver. This person says, later in the day, I'm shooting the you-know-what with a customer named Jack. We start talking. Jack's maybe between 35 and 45. I can't really tell. But for whatever reason, we got talking about Trump. And it was pretty obvious we were on the same side of the fence. So I asked Jack if he listens to you. And he started beaming. He practically took out his wallet and handed it to me. Not even joking. I sold him a small fortune. So if anybody asks how your show competes, well, you've got this locked up. Well, that is very, very nice of you, and I'm glad that you shared that with me on this email, Dan.
Such a nice man.
It's very nice of you. I do appreciate that. And at least we're doing very well when it comes to local nurseries in the Kansas City area. That seems to be, I guess, part of our bread and butter.
The musty moo-moo is a hit in my house.
Oh,
that's a phrase in our house now.
Hey, man, if nothing else, if when I'm long gone here, whether they show me the door or I get to hang around for a bit longer, hopefully it's a while longer, if my legacy is defined by Emmanuel Cleaver, you muster moo-moo-moo. If that's all anybody remembers about me, honestly, I'll be okay with that. If that's the only thing, as we started year 8 of this show last week, that anybody has any memory of on this show, I will end my career here at KCMO with a lot of peace. Because that drop, of all the drops, and we've got dozens of them that we've used on the show over the years, that one may take the cake. Because it made no sense, it's local, and frankly, it exposes Emmanuel Cleaver for what he has, frankly, in large part always been, an empty suit. And that is one of the nicest things I can say. And I'll just leave it at that. But thank you, Dan. As the show continues to grow, it's nice to receive emails like that. And just so you know, Dan, you are not. You muster moo-moo-moo. Despite what some of your colleagues may say at the nursery, you are not a musty moo-moo-moo. The bad from the weekend. Well, in case you didn't know, yesterday was a big day. What was yesterday? It was International Asexuality Day. Yeah. Asexuality is where a person experiences little to no sexual attraction. Asexual people can form deep emotional connections and relationships, but don't experience sexual attraction in the same way others do. So this was another one of these made-up holidays yesterday, International Asexuality Day. And this is another one of those bizarre things that people want to find a reason to celebrate, and they want to put a freaking day on the calendar for it. There is actually an internationalasexualityday.org website you can go to. And the 4 themes of IAD are advocacy, celebration, education, and solidarity. Right here on the website, we encourage anyone who identifies under the ACE umbrella to participate in IAD, particularly but not exclusively in Western countries. Participation could be as simple as sharing a post on social media, but there are also organizations all over the world who are holding events, running campaigns, and supporting causes. Wow. So this is now what we celebrate. I'm pretty sure that, you could just find some guy sitting in his mom's basement on the couch playing video games, and he's, I guess, celebrating International Asexuality Day. I don't know. Seems like that might be, frankly, a day that too many people are unknowingly celebrating in America in 2024. No, we need more. You see, we are at a record low for producing children in this country. That is the last day we should be celebrating. We need to be saying to people, get married, find people that you love, find people that you are attracted to, and build a family. Not celebrating International Asexuality Day, which might be the worst of the worst because it means that, like, you're just not attracted to anything. I don't even get it. It's just bizarre to me. So that's the bad from the weekend. The ugly, these protests down on the plaza and around the country, the hands-off protests, as they were called and dubbed, 50 states had these hands-off protests over the weekend, including on the plaza, and it wasn't exactly a Mensa convention.
They say the issues are too many for signage.
I'm worried about our kids. I'm worried about their education.
I'm really nervous for the people that have less money.
Democracy is what it's all about.
There's too much under attack right now.
Others say they wanted to be here to protest the latest rounds of tariffs. They say this last week has hit Americans hard, especially those that count on the retirement.
My parents have lost all of their 401k. They have to start all over again, and they're nearing 70.
If you're nearing 70 and you just lost your entire 401k, what the heck have you been doing? It doesn't make any sense. We'll get to more of this coming up next hour. But my gosh, when you hear some of these people yelling into the local TV microphones, and that audio is courtesy of Channel 9 KMBC, good job by them finding every buffoon they could find and putting them into one news package. That's tough work to do. But that's the kind of stuff you sit there and you say, they don't even know what they're protesting anymore. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business, has had a lot of conversations with White House folks. He will join us a half hour before the markets open up next. It's been a historic couple of days in the markets late last week, likely looking at another historic week starting this morning. Charlie Gasparino, nobody better, Fox Business Network, Mizzou's finest graduate, joining us on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We're streaming all morning long on the KCMO Talk Radio app. All right, Charlie, it has been a wild couple of days. What is the latest you are hearing this morning and what you're expecting to come today and the rest of this week?
Well, we might bounce around a little more today. I mean, I think there was, I hate to say it like this, but it looks like the markets, the Dow is only going to be down 700 points at the open, not 2,000. So that's a little better. Listen, unless Trump starts negotiating, I don't care if we turn positive today. If he doesn't negotiate, if this thing does happen in 2 days as promised, I mean, the market is going to have to reset to reflect the cost of the tariffs, and you've got to expect many more declines, and like significant declines. Just that when you have this level of tariffs that are promised, and if they're fulfilled. The markets will price that in. Now, the minute, he says something positive, you're going to get a huge rally. Like if he says, listen, I'm going to start negotiating with China right now, huge rally. I'm going to start negotiating with Europe for zero tariffs, huge rally. I mean, the minute that happens, that's the problem with playing this. I talk to a lot of hedge fund managers. They lost too much to capitulate in large with their stocks. On top of that, they don't want to miss the rally if it does happen, and they kind of think it will. They think he's going to be forced to do it.
Okay.
Many lines. Now, for the average person out there, I mean, there's a whole other dynamic. Pete, I did a little, back of the envelope research the other day and try to figure out how many people actually have money in the market. Well, it says just about everybody's got something, 401ks and, pension funds. But what is the average 401k? The average 401k is just $130,000. Okay. Mm-hmm. The median 401k, that's, 50% above or below, is something like $50,000 to $30,000. So most Americans are not saving through the stock market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't look at this and say, well, who cares? It's some Wall Street thing. Except when businesses, because this does impact businesses, there's a real economy aspect to this that the markets are pricing in. Do businesses start laying people off because their global supply chains are screwed up? They can't pass the cost, immediately to consumers. And when they do, consumers don't buy. That's where this gets really treacherous for the average person. And that could happen.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up the right point here, which is it's not necessarily the ebbs and the flows of the markets or stocks, but it is how does it impact potentially the jobs market, right? And that's what we don't know yet, but a lot of that is contingent on what exactly this administration does in the days ahead. So what did you hear over the weekend from these folks around Trump in terms of how you think he ultimately wants to play this? And if this is just Trump saying, hey, I'm throwing out the first number on the negotiating table, let's get to the table and let's now get to work.
No, there's no negotiations really right now.
Okay.
None. Okay, so just take that off. Now, there may be the minute we hang up. Things tend to work that way with Trump. But there's no negotiations right now.
Okay.
There's zero. I think we're going to get the tariffs on Tuesday. And, Wednesday, right? Wednesday is the 9th.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to get it Wednesday. And, and the lead up to that is going to be pretty nasty. I mean, we're going to get more of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it goes. And, well, sorry, I'm laughing and I'm crying here, but it's just, we're in a dangerous, treacherous situation. And what really disappoints me about all this is that he was doing so many good things. The economy was coming back, businesses were starting to feel better. And then he took this detour. And, he could have handled it in a much better way, and he didn't. He could have got the tax cuts through everything and just piecemeal, country by country or region by region, started crafting deals with these people. These foreign leaders about, there's no doubt that we're held at a disadvantage. But, global nuclear war on trade, you take it a left turn, it's like a sharp left turn, and imposing essentially taxes on every country that sends that we have dealings with. And that's going to trickle back to us because they're going to retaliate. Not only that, global economies are integrated. You just can't establish car part factories in the U.S. overnight. They don't exist. And there's going to be significant disruption.
Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business, is here. Now, one thing that you talked about this morning on X, and I thought it was an excellent point, and that is, basically making an attempt here in MAGA economics or MAGAnomics, whatever you want to call it, to the opposite of the Biden-Harris economic scheme, which gave us inflation and hollowed out and destroyed the middle class that had wages that were not keeping up with inflation. So they're trying something obviously completely different. We know that the middle class has been just destroyed in recent years and has hollowed out in recent years. Is this going to work out perfectly? None of us know. But the approach in and of itself seems to be something that the White House is cognizant of to try to support the workers that elected them. What is the political angle on this, Charlie, in terms of your reporting and what you're hearing? And they know, do they know that they're taking a risk here, but they think it's a risk that'll pay off for their voter?
I think they believe that their core voter is not impacted enough by the markets that it will matter, that the markets themselves will matter to them. I think there is an ideological rigidity of some of Donald Trump's support advisors, guys like Peter Navarro, for example, who really do believe that, this is going to create, economic nirvana. I have heard that Donald Trump himself has become much more ideologically rigid on trade, on this sort of protectionist trade policy over the years. He wasn't always like it. He was more of, we tariff you, you tariff us, let's cut a deal. He's more rigid now. And, that's why I think the Peter Navarros right now are winning the day. I think it's crazy. And listen, I don't like the fact that we have trade deficits, and I don't like the fact that countries screw us. But, there's a way of doing this, which doesn't, just come back and bite you in the proverbial rear end. You know what I'm saying?
So
I think we've unleashed the dogs of war in a way that will bite us in the proverbial rear end.
How about Trump's angle here that, hey, these countries desperately need us and we have leverage as the United States? How can he potentially use that leverage to his advantage and, of course, America's advantage in all this?
Yes, that's a great question. He can. But is that the plan? I don't know if that's the plan. You hear like the administration talking out of both sides of its mouth with this. Scott Bessent suggests that's the plan. He's the Treasury Secretary. Peter Navarro gets on TV 2 minutes later and suggests that's not the plan. This is like written in stone and we're bringing back jobs. I mean, that sort of uncertainty is stoking what you see in the markets right now.
Mm-hmm.
And among businesses, this is starting to filter. Stellantis, the car company, laid off 900 people recently over this. And we're going to see more. Companies have to plan. It's going to cost them. Car companies, is this going to be an embedded cost? There is no doubt.
Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business, is on KCMO Talk Radio. So with the markets now, you're expecting a jittery week, a roller coaster week. We'll obviously see how it plays out. There could be a big swing to the upside here as well, depending on what basically Trump puts up on Truth Social in the next couple hours or couple of days. But if there's something that you're looking for, if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, Charlie, what would that light be? What does it look like?
It looks like Donald Trump saying, I'm going to meet with this leader or that leader, and we're going to talk zero tariffs.
Okay.
And saying that this is going to be the policy.
Mm-hmm.
Negotiating down to zero tariffs.
Okay.
And that would turn around the markets. And that would turn around everything.
And are Wall Street guys and gals, are they kind of like, they don't want to be perceived as going against Trump on this right now? It looks like Bill Ackman has done some of that, but it's been pretty quiet on that front.
Remember, Bill Ackman is an independent proprietor, essentially, right? He runs his own hedge fund. Same with Dan Loeb, who's another, significant hedge fund player. So they have freedom to say stuff. What you don't see is Jamie Dimon saying much. You don't see any of the big brokerage chiefs saying, because they're just deathly afraid of Trump, of his wrath. I've written that, and it's so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the markets are literally imploding. Jamie Dimon put out one of the most tepid corporate letters. He did his annual letter today. I was like, where's the beef here? You know what I'm saying? Literally, his world is being turned upside down. And you had to go down 3 paragraphs to get to the tariffs and what it means, and very tepid language. So there is no concerted Wall Street response to this. There is no, joining hands to tell the president, please stop. Let's go to Washington and tell him to stop. There has been, as I've reported, talks between Wall Street executives and Trump about this. They initially came away with the impression he wanted to negotiate. That has kind of ended now.
Gotcha.
So, but who knows with this guy? This might be part of the art of the deal, quite frankly. Or it could be that, I wrote a column. You saw my column. I wrote about how, I thought, he was going to negotiate, and a mutual friend of ours, and I put this in the column, said, no. He's different these days. He is an ideologue on this. So temper your expectations.
All right. Charlie, we appreciate the insight, the reporting as always, and we'll talk to you soon. It's going to be a wild week. Thanks for being here on KCMO.
You got it, Pete.
All right. Good stuff there. I appreciate Charlie Gasparino joining us on 95.7 FM. Listen, Charlie's got the reporter hat on. I'm fully supporting this. I'm giving it a shot. That's just me. It might be crazy. Sure, it might be wrong. But something else I can't get out of my head is that the people, and I don't mean Charlie does a great job. Listen, Charlie knows Trump world very well, has great reporting sources on this stuff. I'm just saying, broadly speaking, the loudest voices against this are the same people who have been wrong on literally everything for the last at least half a decade, if not more. So maybe they're right. Maybe the broken clock is right twice a day and they just happen to land on it once. But something's got to be done on this front. And based on term number 1, the success there, the failures of the last 4 years, I'm willing to give it a shot. 913-408-7957. Are you getting jittery ahead of the markets opening up here in just a few minutes? By the way, we have a giveaway for tickets that will begin at 8:45. We'll tell you about those next.
Call Mundo 913-408-7957. Now on 95.7 FM.
Markets open up in 6 minutes. Keep an eye on what that looks like. Futures for the Dow off 1,000 points. We are giving away Alabama and Lee Greenwood tickets. How about that? Woo! Coming up at 8:45 on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app as always. We are looking forward to giving those away. They are going to be at Azura Amphitheater on Friday, May 23rd. So that
Sandstone for boomers.
Yes, there you go. Azura, Sandstone, T-Mobile, Sprint Center. It's all, one and the same. Exactly. So that's 20 minutes away on 95.7 FM. So, listen, you heard from E.J. Antoni of the Heritage Foundation last hour. You heard from Charlie Gasparino right there. They've got some concerns on how this tariff thing might end up playing out. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I know this. I voted for a guy for a third straight time who was proven as president to have economic success. What you saw during Trump 1.0 is the wage growth grow at the fastest rate for those at the bottom end of the income bracket. You saw more wealth grow across the income brackets than you've seen in a very long time in this country. And we saw Joe Biden print money left and right that did not work for the average American. It caused inflation, and the rich got richer, and the middle class got screwed. So is this the best way to go about doing it? I don't know. But a large part of me feels like there is an art of the deal going on here where Trump is basically throwing these wild numbers up against the wall. And we can talk all day about whether or not the formula that they rolled out in the Rose Garden last week was the right formula to do reciprocal tariffs. I mean, that is so far in the weeds. I think the broader point here is this is how Trump has negotiated for his entire life. He throws out a crazy number. He overasks. He shocks the system. And then he comes to the negotiating table. And I'm hopeful that's how it's going to play out, but I can't say I know. But we'll see. Mark's an Independence. What's up, Mark? Where are you at right now?
I'll tell you what, I support all this. I'm 68. I've seen the transition of America. I get a little aggravated at people. I understand you look at your 401k and it can get to you a little bit. But my goodness, we have to do something to turn things around. And yes, there's going to be some bad medicine. And I remember back in college in the 80s, I was debating professors then about this free trade stuff. And I always asked them, well, do you have any studies that show that really the middle class is going to really benefit? What jobs we're going to lose? What jobs we're going to gain? They could never produce it.
Yeah.
So, I'm getting tired of it. And there's a song by Alan Jackson called Little Man. If you ever get a chance, you play it. It describes the sentiment, at least of people my age, who've been laid off 3 and 4 times in their lifetime because the people they were working for moved overseas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you, man. Got a minute for you, Rick in Leavenworth. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, here's what I think. People need to chill out. I say give this 6 months at least. And there are opportunities here. For example, I'm converting a lot of my taxable investments into my Roth IRAs. Now's the time to do that. If you're in the long haul and can invest now because it's going to grow. Give it 6 months. That's what I say.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Rick. I appreciate it, my man. And listen, yeah, I mean, if you're younger, if you're sitting there like me, just kind of close your eyes. But it's going to be fascinating. The opening bell in 2.5 minutes. We'll talk about it when it comes back with an open next on KCMO.
Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Stick around. I'm coming up at 10 o'clock right after Pete Mundo on KCMO 95.7 FM.
Dow is off 1,300 points to open up trading here this morning. That's 3.5%. S&P off nearly 4%, 193 points. NASDAQ opens up down 636 points. That is 4% this morning on KCMO after, of course, last week, what was the worst week for stocks since March of 2020 at the start of the pandemic. So here we are once again. And this is the roller coaster ride that is continuing for now a second straight week. 913-408-7957. We're giving away those Alabama Lee Greenwood tickets in 10 minutes here on KCMO. They'll be at Azura Amphitheater on May 23rd. Dan's in Prairie Village. Go ahead, Dan. You're on KCMO.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I wanted to say that people need to, look in the past at the market when it drops 5 to 7,500 points compared to where we're at now. I mean, this could completely change the U.S. economy as far as in a positive light. If we can get the tariffs to where they need to be, people need to not freak out.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Dan. And maybe we're wrong, but I am not backing off it right now.
I agree. And I sent you over a text that, 21, 22. I mean, the market dropped from, it dropped about 5,000 or 6,000 points back then. And at least there's a reason behind this, which could really be a positive thing in the future.
Yeah. I mean, you go back to that year, and 2022 was a bad year, right, for the markets. Was off about 20% that year.
Yeah. And at least, and you scratch your head, and at least now you can look at this and say, okay, well, there's a reason why. And going forward, it's like looking at sports. You got to do conditioning. You got to do running. If you're not playing well, you got to go through some pain, and your team will be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dan, listen, that's obviously the long-term play here by the administration. And the reason that nobody has tried this is because of the political calculation that could be at play as well. On the text line, I've got this here. You can kiss the midterms goodbye. Blue tsunami coming in hot. Okay. All right. That's on the text line.
You mustard moo.
If you think you're predicting November of 26 on April 7th of 25, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. But one of the reasons no one's ever tried this is because of political fear of what it could mean for either their own political prospects in the case of a president or, members of Congress. And frankly, they failed all of us for a generation now. Democrats and Republicans, let's be very clear, have failed all of us for a generation. They seemingly have all done very well. They've taken care of their lobbyists. The suburbs of Washington, D.C., are some of the ritziest, glitziest suburbs in all of America. While regular towns across the country, including here in Kansas and Missouri, in too many cases have been hollowed out. And now they're the ones freaking out over what has been a roller coaster couple of weeks in the markets. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not going to sit here and predict that this is definitely going to be the answer and it's going to be fantastic. You just wait. I don't know. I'm not going to make a fake promise. I do know this for the stock market. At some point, it will come back. It always does. Had a great conversation on Friday with Mark Falter, Retirement Income Hour, Saturday and Sunday mornings at 9. And he's been saying this for months. If you were approaching retirement, you had to get out of equities. You had a great run the last 15 years. Get out, reallocate, take a little off the table. That was on you to prepare for this moment. And if you're someone who's, more in line with me, you buy. If nothing else, you close your eyes. If you can't be buying right now, you close your eyes and you realize you don't lose unless you sell. Let's be very clear. The only way you are losing money is if you sell right now. That's it. 913-408-7957. Let's go to Gladstone. That's where the musty moo-moo himself is. Good morning, my man. How are you?
Yeah, good. Well, there's one name I haven't heard thrown around during all this, and that's Dave Ramsey, man. I mean, if you worked hard, didn't get in the trap of keeping up with the Joneses, and are debt free, you're just sitting back going, hey, I'm fine. There's no problem here. And for older folks like me, if you're still 100% in the market, like you said, Pete, shame on you. I mean, and all it is, because I remember when the stock market fell in the 1980s, and I remember Sam Walton, you know, they were talking about, oh, you've lost so much money. And like you said, it's just paper. Right now, it's just paper.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit there, keep working hard, doing what you're doing, especially people your age. Keep on keeping on, and you're going to be fine.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Musty. I appreciate that, my man.
You mustard moo.
Always appreciate the insights. There you go. 913-408-7957. That's the text line and the studio line on a Monday morning. Dow is off 5% right now, 1,500 points. S&P off 4%. NASDAQ also off 4.5% this morning as we open up trading. And also of note here, the 10-year Treasury yield falling below 4%. Jerome Powell noting that he believes higher tariffs are likely to end up raising inflation. If I saw this here in the last few minutes correctly, the Fed has announced a closed board meeting today. Yeah, here it is. The Federal Reserve has announced a closed board meeting today that is coming up at 10:30 Central Time this morning. So there's also going to be pressure to cut rates here. And one of the strategies that Donald Trump is trying to implement in all this is once again a reset of the economy that works better for the middle class. His thought process is in part is if that we can get interest rates down, what does that do? That allows people to refinance their homes. That allows people to access potentially their own equity that they've had locked up in their homes for a very long time at a lower rate. That potentially helps, as much as we've talked a lot about the car market and the car industry potentially getting hurt with tariffs. That could very well help the car industry and help them unload some of these vehicles they've been sitting on while interest rates have been very high. That can be beneficial. It will be much more beneficial for the average person if you get interest rates down than if you worry about, a 401k right now who's for somebody who's 42 years old. And Charlie Gasparino had a great statistic that he shared on the show earlier this hour. The average 401k is $130,000. So you're talking about a 20% drop from the high. So that's, someone who's from $130,000 now down to $108,000. He says the median 401k is about $50,000. So half the people are above 50, half are below 50. That's the median 401k per Charlie Gasparino this morning. They are not having the same conversations that hedge fund managers are having right now. And the other fascinating part of the markets the last couple of days, late last week, it was two of the biggest days for retail investors in the country's history. Retail investors, that's you, that's me, were buying on Thursday and Friday. Hedge funds were unloading. Hedge funds were stacking up cash. Retail investors were buying. I don't want to read into that too much, but what that tells me is that regular people are actually trusting the process. Wall Street isn't. Hedge funds aren't. And they may have their reasons. Listen, they're playing a different game than you're playing buying a few shares of Apple right now or NVIDIA or Amazon or whatever. But that is a fascinating overlooked storyline of the last couple of days, that the retail investor is seeing this as a buying opportunity, while hedge funds are taking money off the table and moving into cash due to the uncertainty. All right, it's 8:44. It is your first chance this week to win Alabama Lee Greenwood tickets, Azura Amphitheater, coming up on Friday, May 23rd. Seventh caller right now to 913-408-7957 is going to win those tickets to see Alabama and Lee Greenwood at Azura Amphitheater all week long. We've got those for you right here on 95.7 FM KCMO And as always, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up, who's been behind the protest, the hands-off protest that took place over the weekend here in Kansas City and in all 50 states around the country? Well, you're not going to be shocked by it, but we'll tell you who, and we've got the numbers to back it up next.
It's Mundo in the Morning. Now on FM at 95.7. Set a preset on your radio. KCMO Talk Radio.
All righty there, John. Who do we got as our winner this morning for the Alabama Lee Greenwood tickets?
Jason in Baldwin City, our inaugural winner. He'll be going to that show coming up May 23rd, assuming tariffs don't shut the country down Wednesday, of course. So we'll have another chance for you to win coming up tomorrow right here on Mundo in the Morning.
Well, the good news is Alabama and Lee Greenwood are not foreign performers, so there's no tariff on them.
They're in the country, so they're here.
Yeah, they're here. So I like their odds of putting on that show.
Well, you know, the price of gas. We canceled Christmas. Forget about the 4th of July.
You're right.
Hey, remember, we were lucky to get one hot dog under the Biden years.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But I digress.
I feel good about the show going on May 23rd. So,
excellent.
Jason, you're going to be there, buddy. Congratulations. We'll give away those tickets all morning long or all week long at 8:45 here on KCMO Talk Radio. So we had these protests, these absurdly ridiculous, childish protests that took place over the weekend. It was called the Hands Off protest. We had them right here in Kansas City as well. And a lot of you probably wondering, you know, who's behind these protests? Well, there was a group called Indivisible Project that was on Rachel Maddow's show late last week, bragging about their participation in coordinating these protests. So a quick search at OpenSocietyFoundations.org shows that you're going to be shocked, all right? Finish your coffee. You're going to be shocked by this. George Soros has given millions of dollars to the Indivisible Project over the year.
Talk about a bombshell.
I know. You cannot fathom the idea that George Soros has funded coordinated protests around America in the wake of Doge, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and everything happening in this country over the last couple of months. In fact, George Soros made his largest donation to the Indivisible Project in the last couple of years of $3 million. He's given them a total of about, 3, 2, 5, that's 6. He's given them over $7 million going back to 2017. So are you surprised by that at all? I'm not. And no one listening is going to be shocked. Even those of you who support these protests, come on now. You're not shocked by this one bit. And then when you hear some of the protesters over the weekend, it was exactly what you would have expected. Shall we roll the tape? Yeah, let's do it. KCTV 5.
Hundreds of protesters took to the Country Club Plaza calling for President Trump to get his hands off.
We're here to save our democracy and to stop the tariffs.
Save our democracy with George Soros' hard-earned money and stop the tariffs.
Protesters say they are fed up with policies that went into effect during Trump's administration, and this is how they are fighting back.
Tariffs are wrecking the total globe, not just our United States. They are taxes.
Immigration, DEI, and workers' rights appear in bold letters on the signs of demonstrators, representing what they are trying to protect. This comes as mass deportations continue, with hundreds of Venezuelan immigrants awaiting their fate at a maximum security prison in El Salvador.
Overall, if what's going on right now doesn't impact you, if you aren't heartbroken by people being basically disappeared or kidnapped off the streets, with little or no due process, I think, where's your humanity at that point?
Yeah, I hate when those gang members who are in the country illegally
hate it when that happens.
Just kind of disappear from the country. Boy, that is really a disappointment, said nobody ever. At least nobody who doesn't, have the dopey yard sign sitting on their front lawn. In this house, we believe no human is illegal. But I like my ritzy neighborhood where I don't allow anybody else to move in next door unless they pass the smell test.
Yeah, people, the tariff's a tax.
I know.
Boy, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, So now the tariffs are their big thing as well, that they are protesting down on the plaza. The reality is they're not protesting anything other than Orange Man bad. And they are just basically, it's like when my toddlers are, drawing something and they're learning how to draw. It's just kind of a lot of colors and there's no real rhyme or reason to it. They're certainly not coloring within the lines. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Claire's getting pretty darn good at it. She appears to maybe have some artistic talent, but certainly not Chloe. She's 3. And forget the 1-year-old. So she's just kind of drawing and making colors and drawing colors over colors and hoping something sticks. And I will tell her, "Oh, Chloe, that looks fantastic. Great job. You're coming along." Because she's a 3-year-old and I'm trying to build up her confidence. These people on the plaza may act like they're 3. They may pretend to be 3 years old. Their arguments are just as persuasive as a 3-year-old, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it with them because guess what? They're adults. And they look like children. So they're there to protest DOGE and tariffs and federal cuts and this and that. And the only common theme in their protests and in their arguments is Trump. That's it. That's all they got. The problem for them is that Trump, while still not being as popular as some of his policies are, is historically more popular than he has been, or his approval rating is higher. I would say that's different than popularity. His approval rating is higher than it ever was during his first term. So they're running the same playbook from really 2017 to 2020. And I don't think we're in a place where it's going to work the same way.
Some protesters raised concerns about affordable health care.
I'm worried about our seniors who they're trying to take Medicaid from and things like that, and our veterans. And so all of the things that he's doing is going to impact the people who are middle class or at the bottom.
Thoughts of the future were top of mind for others.
Especially important for me and my daughter because I want to make sure that she has the opportunity to vote and is not kept from the polls for something like the SAVE Act.
Many voices came together for several causes, and they say it doesn't stop here.
We're asking the community not to hide, to stand up for what the United States believes in, which is democracy.
How about the Karen dunk at the end? I hope my daughter can vote one day. Take a chill pill there, Karen. It's going to be all right. I apologize to all the Karens out there, but you've given me no choice in the matter. All right? These Karens are killing you. You got to love the lady that shows up on the plaza with her kid on a Saturday. I hope my 3-year-old can vote one day. I don't know, under this guy, he's going to be a dictator, and I'm not going to be able to have my kids vote. Man. It really, I do, a part of me does feel bad for these people. I really do, John. It's a tough way to go.
If they want to help out, they could get a second weekend job instead of being the bourgeoisie out on the plaza.
That's a good point as well. But hey, got to go to Starbucks after the big protest, you know?
That's right.
Oh, my goodness. News coming up in 2 minutes. And when we come back, is all this right-wing Marxism or not? I'll explain on KCMO. Is this right-wing Marxism at play here? No, it's not. But it's what I'm hearing from a lot of people that I agree with in my space, that we have a like-mindedness. But I'm hearing a lot of folks insist that when you hear the following clips from Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, on Tucker Carlson's show, and I will play it for you here in a second, this is nothing but right-wing socialism and right-wing Marxism that is being attempted right now as we hit the 9 o'clock hour on KCMO Talk Radio. The markets are once again off in a big way this morning, continuing the losses from last week. Dow is off 1,000 points, S&P off 100, NASDAQ is off 243. They're all off basically about 2.5%. That's not what's going on here. I'll play the Scott Bessent clip, and I'll explain to you why this is not like Bernie Sanders socialism from the right side of the political aisle.
The good news is we have President Trump's previous term when everyone said none of this was going to work. Oh, the China tariffs are going to do this. They're going to cause inflation. They didn't. This is going to happen to working class. It's going to be bad for working class Americans. Well, guess what? Working class Americans, the hourly workers did better than supervisory workers. The bottom 50% of households, their net worth increased faster than the top 10% of households. And look, I'm not happy with what's going on in the market today, but the distribution of equities across households, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities, 88% of the stock market. The next 40% owns 12% of the stock market. The bottom 50 has debt. They have credit card bills. They rent their homes. They have auto loans. And we've got to give them some relief. That I was struck by the statistic from last year.
That's the message right there. Just as a bystander, I'm like, wow, okay.
Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, with Tucker Carlson on his show late last week. And some people heard that. Some people who I would say are like-minded to me heard that and said, oh, this is just a populist Republican version of Marxism and socialism. And the answer is no, it's not. That's nonsense. Acknowledging a reality is a good place to start. Understanding why there is arguably class warfare going on in this country for the first time in a century is a good thing to acknowledge. Then the question becomes, what do you do about it? See, Bernie Sanders would say, well, Elon Musk should be giving his Tesla stock to poor people. That's not what Scott Bessent is saying. Scott Bessent is saying, how do we create a world where the middle class can invest in the stock market and can see the gains of the stock market, just like the top 10% have experienced? Instead, what we've seen is a concentration of stock market wealth that has only grown the gap between haves and have-nots in this country over the last several years. You have 10% of this country that owns 88% of the stocks. That is not sustainable to grow a strong and robust middle class, which is what Donald Trump was elected on, because Joe Biden's policies killed the middle class. Their wages did not keep up with inflation. They did not have the investments in the markets to see the gains of the last few years to make up for the fact that their wages were not keeping up with inflation. And that's the reason that, well, not the reason, but one of the reasons that Kamala Harris lost. She was also a horrible candidate. It's a reason that Democrats have been wiped out in the House and the Senate and the White House the last couple of elections. This is not about redistributing anything. It's about creating an economy that allows more people to go to their Charles Schwab account, their Fidelity account, their Vanguard account, and invest in the markets, which is a great way to create wealth and live the American dream. That's the goal here. Will it work? I'm hoping like heck it will, and I'm backing the people who are doing it, hoping that it will, and believing that, you know what, they've been right a lot more than they've been wrong going back to 2017. So I'm going to ride with them here on this. But don't call this right-wing Marxism. That's not true. There's no redistribution that's at play here. That's not the goal here at all by any stretch. I mean, you know, I have heard stories. I don't remember it, obviously, but, you know, my father would tell me stories about my grandfather buying stocks, you know, calling up to check on the stock ticker back in the 1960s. And he was a fireman in New York City. He was a middle class as middle class gets. But he could invest in the stock market. He could buy some stocks. He could find some money and scratch it together and, you know, try to live that American dream. And he was interested in doing that. That is harder than ever today to do that. People can't buy homes, which is a big part of the American dream. They've been priced out of the housing market. They've been priced out of the stock market. Their wages have not kept up with the cost of living, with inflation. And that's the reset button that the administration is trying to hit right now. And yes, there is risk associated with this. There is no doubt about it. There is risk associated with this. But you tell me what the better option is. Whistling past the graveyard and doing the same old thing that has failed that middle class, the middle class that came running to the Republican Party in a way that it hasn't in 75 years, with a diverse coalition of voters in the middle class who said, you know what, we're going to give this party a shot. We're going to give this guy, Donald Trump, a shot, despite the fact that, largely speaking, folks of our socioeconomic level have been voting for Democrats for decades now. We're going to give this guy a shot. They put their trust in him, and he's making a run at it. And yes, the Wall Street class is freaking out, and the biggest risk right now is not that stocks go down. The biggest risk, of course, is that the jobs market gets impacted here. But that's not happening tomorrow or next week or even next month. Don't forget, the jobs numbers came out on Friday, and it got lost in the conversation around the stock market going down. But the jobs numbers came out and actually blew out the expectations. The expectations on Friday were for about 144,000 jobs. We got 240,000, and it was not driven by government for the first time in 4 years. The government, which was a top 3 employer every single month under Joe Biden, actually lost jobs in March. The federal job, or the government jobs, not just federal, the government jobs went down in March. And the jobs numbers came in at nearly double the expectations. That's the real economy. That's the regular economy. That's the economy that Donald Trump was voted in to restore and to grow, not the stock market. Because if the stock market was the economy, Kamala Harris would be cackling her way through the White House, and Tiananmen Tim would be, skipping his way down the West Wing and doing his Rockettes impression down the West Wing, swinging his legs and swinging his hands and swinging all his other body parts as well, probably, down the West Wing. 913-408-7957 is how you join us on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Let's go to Mike. He is in Leawood. What's up, Mike? You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete. Great show this morning. I couldn't agree more with what you've said about conservatives, and I would say their skepticism as far as whether or not this is a socialist policy on the part of the right. I couldn't agree more with you. Being in Main Street, I have a perspective on these tariffs. I talked to a lot of people over the weekend, and one of the things I never got an answer for is why is it that Taiwan, Japan, EU, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, you name it, Canada, Mexico, for decades, why can they have a policy that includes tariffs? And yet, as soon as we impose a policy with tariffs reciprocating, that all of a sudden our economy, we're going to lose jobs. All of a sudden it's going to be detrimental to our economy. When every country out there has shown that no, it's not detrimental to your economy. Otherwise, they would have got rid of their policies. I mean, it's common sense to think about they've been doing it for decades, and it hasn't been detrimental to Japan. It hasn't been detrimental to Taiwan, hasn't been detrimental to Mexico. So as soon as we do it, the naysayers, the skeptics, I think they need to be measured in how they go about this. And I think it's more about a little bit of hyperbole than anything on the left and in the legacy media to say, look, these tariffs are going to be detrimental, when in fact, no. Let's go ahead and use the playbook that the world has been using against us for about 4 decades.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? It's worth a shot. That's where I'm at right now with it, Mike.
Right.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And listen, you look at it too from the big picture perspective. Is it a negotiating play to get people to the table? It appears that it is. And look at this. Look at this. The Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ have all turned green in the last few minutes. Dow is now up 500 points. It opened up down 1,500. We have seen a 2,000-point swing in the Dow in the last half hour. NASDAQ's up 500. NASDAQ was down 600. NASDAQ was down 4.5%. It's now up 3%. This all happening in the last 20 minutes or so.
Since Charlie was on the air here. Right. He got off the phone and got busy.
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about a swing. Now, I'm not like sitting here saying, yeah, the markets are. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying this is right now a roller coaster. It is a gamble what is happening right now at this moment. And you cannot use the market today, last week, tomorrow, next week as an indicator at this point in time as to what all this is going to mean for the broader economy moving forward over the next year, 5 years, or 10 years. Dow is now up 800 points. It's up 200 points since it said it was up 600 points 45 seconds ago. I don't know what's going on. I'm just saying it is wild what is happening, and we're 45, 50 minutes into trading today. Holy cow. We have our caller of the day coming up bottom of the hour. I haven't even gotten to this CNN package they did on Doge in Kansas City. I'll get to that and share it with you next on KCMO. In the meantime, you're thinking about that remodel on a tub or a shower? Hey, you want to save some money? How about $2,000 off and 12 months same as cash at The Plumbing Pro with Pete's Deal? They're offering it right now at The Plumbing Pro here in Kansas City. Steve and his team have been in business for 45 years. They're locally owned, they're locally operated, and they have a 4.8 rating on Google with hundreds of reviews. You don't have that kind of success here in Kansas City without being trusted, without having fair prices, and without taking care of your customers. So if you're finally ready for that new tub or shower, use The Plumbing Pro. Go to theplumbingpro.com. That's theplumbingpro.com here in Kansas City. Or call them at 816-763-8200 and ask them for Pete's Deal.
If it's happening in KCMO, it's on KCMO 95.7 FM. Here's Pete Mundo.
All right, now we're back in the red on the stock, so I don't know what's going on here. It has been insane. We're 53, 54 minutes into trading. It's wild right now what's happening. So the reason that stocks turned green momentarily about 10, 15 minutes ago is that it came out that Trump is considering pausing all tariffs except for China for 90 days to work on negotiations. So then things swung up to the green. Now they are back down into the red. I mean, this is a freaking roller coaster. Just listen. If you're going to have some fun trading this, know what you're doing. I'll just leave it at that. If not, follow Mark's parlays. You got like a casual parlay, Mark, maybe for tonight for Houston, Florida?
Yeah, I can get us one later.
Okay. That would be nice to end the show. All right. This
might be safer than the market.
This is crazy what's going on right now. All right. CNN package over the weekend on Doge cuts in Kansas City. Mayor Lucas, of course, made himself available for this. I know that's going to be a shocker to you.
Talk about a bombshell.
Here's the 3-minute package from CNN talking about Doge's impact on the Kansas City economy. More fear-mongering, as you would expect.
Than 1,000 miles from Washington, D.C., the impact of Doge is hitting the heartland. In Kansas City, the federal government is the largest employer, a growing presence in recent years. In Trump's first term, the Department of Agriculture relocated 2 divisions to the area to save money and move closer to farmers. Now, USDA is among the many agencies scaling back here. All told, job cuts are expected to be in the thousands.
But I'll be honest, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the city. It's going to hurt the people a lot. It's going to hurt their families. And it's going to hurt a lot of secondary businesses.
Kansas City.
So that was Mayor Lucas there. It's going to hurt the people, the city, their families, and secondary businesses. I'm writing all this down here on my notepad, which is nothing but my own scribble that only I could read. Mark and John couldn't read this chicken scratch if their life depended on it, and that's okay. So once again, here we are. Now, we were told weeks ago when IRS cuts were coming to Kansas City that we were basically all going to die because people were going to get laid off from the IRS. Our taxes were not going to be refunded on time. Maybe we wouldn't be able to actually even file our taxes. Who knew what was going to happen? I guess we moved past that crisis and we've manufactured a different crisis. Now, listen, if somebody loses their job, I get it. They get impacted. But the notion that Kansas City cannot survive without federal government jobs, I think that's actually an insult to Kansas City. This city is great. It's our home. And it's not great because of 30,000 federal jobs. I'm not saying those people or those jobs hurt this city, but it's not what makes us great. See, the insinuation here is that we can't survive without the government in this town or, frankly, in this country is the broader conversation that's being had right now. That's all BS. This country did not become the greatest country in the history of mankind because of the government, because of bureaucrats, because of the growth of government. It became great because we led the way, and we have for 250 years in innovation and in hard work and in being the land of opportunity and in being a place where you can rise up the economic ladder no matter where you start. That's why America's great. That's why Kansas City is great. Not because of these made-up, ridiculous. I don't want Mark to have to hit the dump button here, so I'm going to temper myself. Bizarre accusations that if we lose any government workers, Kansas City goes down the drain. It's complete and utter nonsense. It's also a narrative that whether it's CNN or leadership wants to desperately pursue in the name of everything Trump does is bad. That's the name of the game here. And it's very clear what's going on. We'll get to more of it here after the bottom of the hour news and our caller of the day, all coming up next on KCMO.
Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Stick around. I'm coming up at 10 o'clock right after Pete Mundo on KCMO 95.7 FM.
The whipsaw trading session continues on Wall Street. So the Dow opened up down 1,500 points. It swung in the last half hour to being in the green, plus 500. Now it's down 600. Here's what's happened in the last couple of minutes. So there was a report that Trump was considering a 90-day tariff pause for everybody except for China. Then CNBC reported that nobody at the White House is aware of Trump considering a 90-day tariff pause. And within the last few minutes, the Dow is now tanking once again to being down 700. I mean, tanking might be too strong of a word, but it's off 2%. So down 1,500, up almost 1,000, now back down 700. And we are an hour and 5 minutes into the trading day. It is crazy. Just know what you're doing. Mark's going to have a good parlay for us to wrap up the day. Just, something nice and easy and friendly you can wager $5 on so you don't get tempted by these wild swings in the markets that are happening today. A little family-friendly fun as Mark tries to win the Cumulus Kansas City March Madness pool tonight as well. If Florida gets the victory, right, Mark? That's what gives you the win.
I actually miscalculated. I've already won the bracket.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, Kevin Keatsman will get second place if Houston wins, so I'm pulling for Houston now.
Oh, okay. So you already won.
Yes.
So if Houston wins, you and Keatsman go 1-2.
Yep. That's it.
All right. Good for you guys. Good for you guys. Little money in the pocket there for Parlay Van Sickle. I like it. Well done there. Well done. Congratulations, my man. Let me continue before our caller of the day with the CNN package that they rolled out over the weekend on Doge cuts, how it could impact Kansas City. Quentin Lucas was just quoted in the piece that we played for you saying that this will have an impact on people, our cities, and our families, and secondary businesses. As if what makes this town great is our government. It's not what makes Kansas City great. It will never be what makes Kansas City great, no matter how hard the people in charge try to make it that way. From Kansas City, Missouri, to Overland Park, where they're growing their bureaucracy, to Johnson County, Kansas, to sadly so many others. You will never be, as governments, what make this community great.
The city's Democratic mayor says the city won't be able to absorb all the laid-off workers.
We're not building a new 4,000-person factory to replace 4,000 jobs at the IRS at the same time. And frankly, these folks will have very different skills.
At Kauffman Stadium, Jason Buck has picked up bartending part-time. He used to manage fleets of government vehicles until he was fired a month ago. The search for a new job was slow going.
Get a spattering of interviews over the course of a month and, haven't really had any headway on that.
While we spoke with him, his manager called to say he'd been reinstated. He doesn't know for how long.
Do you worry that this is temporary?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know if I'm going back just to be a part of a reduction in force at some point, or I have no idea what to expect.
Okay, I mean, that's tough. I get it. You lose a job, you go find some other work, you're applying to different jobs, you get reinstated. I get it. That's tough. It's really tough. But I'm certainly not going to empathize. I'll empathize with any workers and regular people. I'm not going to empathize with media outlets and with politicians who willingly cheered on government shutdowns during COVID in the name of all for one, one for all, slow the spread.
And the dismissal of the employees thereof who did not get vaccinated.
Oh, yes. Don't forget about those.
Yeah, there's a timeline. We continue on there. You betcha.
I know that we have short-term memories, but my memory is not that short-term. I will say waking up as early as I do is not doing well for my memory. My memory is not what it used to be. I will say that. But I do remember a world where politicians and media outlets told us to shut down our businesses, to stop making a living in the name of slowing the spread, and then cheered on firing people who didn't take and
regardless of their position.
Yes, regardless of their position, take the COVID shot. So that's where we find ourselves right now. Suddenly these same folks are like, oh my gosh, how could you let a federal worker go? You can't afford it anymore. Never could afford it. We grew the government for the last 5 years.
Bingo.
And guess what? We're trying to roll back some of those numbers to 2019 levels. Not 1969 levels, 2019 levels is what we're trying to go back to here.
Those jobs reports over the last year indicated the federal government was one of the biggest hirers.
Yes.
Therefore, those being dismissed as probationary employees were only recently hired. So some of this scary number are inflated numbers from the last administration.
That's a good point.
So how entrenched are these probationary employees when we say, oh, my God, you're going to lose everything? Well, wait a minute. They just got there if they've even shown up for work.
Oh, that's true. And should we use the line that Joe Biden said when, people said, hey, what about those folks who lost their jobs on the Keystone Pipeline? Learn the code, bro. Come on, man. Come on.
Touché.
Learn the code. Oh, what do you want me to tell you? All right. I mean, it's just...
Daniel Sharpenberg worries his job is on the line, too. He joined the IRS 16 years ago. With 2 teenage kids, he's taken a second job to save money.
Some days I get off work here and I go straight to the movie theater. I bring my work uniform with me and I change and I go straight to the movie theater and work there. I'm 45 years old. I'm too old to be working 2 jobs.
In Kansas City...
Wait.
I didn't know there was an age limit. I should have said something sooner. Honey, I can't take a second job. I'm 65.
Okay. You just heard that. See, that employee, I feel no sympathy for. Okay?
Yeah.
The first guy, I will feel sympathy for individuals who I think have common sense and are trying to hustle. I did not know that there was an age limit to having a couple of jobs, to building a side hustle. How many of us, myself included over the years, have done that? There was one point in my career I had 4 different jobs when I was working through this crazy industry. And you're going to tell me I'm just too old for it.
Or the small business guy who works 80 hours a week and then some.
Well, exactly. What's the limit to your second job? If your first job is 30, 35 hours, you got a lot of hours for a second job. A lot of time to fill, man. It's that kind of stuff. It's that kind of attitude that is pervasive in bureaucracies, and I have zero sympathy for. It's those that have got to be shown the door, sayonara, see you later, don't come back, we don't need you.
The IRS has one of its 2 national hubs, and nearly every agency has a regional hub, 30,000 workers in all. Just steps from a major federal building that Washington wants to sell, the owner of Waterbird Coffee says business has picked up with federal workers ordered back to offices, but he fears it's short-lived.
Definitely the mood just feels sort of different. Everything feels kind of stressful, uncertain. It's just kind of created this mood of anxiety overall.
The layoffs will ripple through the economy. Many federal workers say they may have to sell their home, others canceling family vacations. For each federal worker who loses their job, economists say the pullback in their spending could cost the city another 1.5 jobs, multiplying the effect on unemployment.
Okay, I don't know where these cockamamie numbers come from. I don't. But you're telling me that the loss... I know, yes, the experts, you're right.
Air quotes.
Yes. 1 government job loss creates 1.5 job losses in the private sector. I'd like to see the data to back that up. But I'll take you at your word. Let's say that's true. Let's just say, for sake of the conversation, I give that to you. That is all the more reason to reset the economy and shrink the government. If the economic strength is dependent on the government workforce, we're screwed. It's over. We no longer are a capitalist society if 1 government job loss leads to 1.5 job losses in the private sector. That is all the more reason to literally start from scratch and burn it down. Figuratively, of course. All the more reason to do it. If that economic data point is true, which frankly, I'm not exactly buying. It's 9:44 on a Monday morning. Let's roll our caller of the day.
It's the Mundo in the Morning Caller of the Day on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7.
Steve in KCK. What's up, Steve? You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete, you're a finance guy. Maybe you can tell me this, tariffs seem to be working for China okay, and they seem to be working for India and the EU, and the rest of the world seems to be doing okay off tariffs. But now that America is going to reciprocate, now all of a sudden it's a bad thing and markets are crashing. It's like, why is it a bad thing when America implements tariffs, but the rest of the world doesn't? It's okay.
Stephen, KCK, little too much common sense for, today's world, dating back to last week on KCMO Talk Radio. The goal here for this administration appears to be free and fair trade with certain partners. And then when it comes to China, you know what? Hold the screws to them. That's what has to be done, not just for economic reasons, but also for national security reasons. And that's why there was a report earlier this hour that Trump was considering a 90-day pause on all tariffs except for China. And then CNBC reported here in the last 20 minutes that that's not true. And the markets went from down 1,500 to up 1,000 to now the Dow is off 650 points. We'll wrap it up. Mark will have a little parlay for us. But before we get to that, I've got to give some credit and praise to a college coach for standing up to a woke reporter. I'll share it with you to wrap up the show next on KCMO.
You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM.
Shout out to the University of Oklahoma softball coach, Patty Gasso. So her players, some of her players, went to go see Riley Gaines on the campus at the University of Oklahoma last week. Riley Gaines, of course, is now famous for standing up to that swimmer dude from UPenn and standing up and saying, I am not going to allow myself, at the time she was a swimmer at the University of Kentucky, losing NCAA races to men. And she did. And unlike so many others before her, she stood up to them. Will Thomas. She said, I'm not going to put up with this. And now she's become a household name. She was actually here in these studios a couple of years ago when she was helping Derek Schmidt on the campaign trail for Kansas governor. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. But now she's, a Fox News personality. She's with Outkick, and she does a lot of great work, and she goes to campuses and talks about this stuff. So she goes to the University of Oklahoma last week. A bunch of OU softball players went to the event. So it's not just that people like Riley Gaines are having success. It's also that, you know what? Notable OU softball players, and for those that don't know, Oklahoma has the best softball program in America at the collegiate level. They've won multiple national championships in a row. Patty Gasso is the biggest star from a coaching perspective in college softball. And their players are like, listen, we support Riley Gaines. We don't want to play against dudes. We're going to go to her event. So then a sports reporter after OU softball's game over the weekend decided to ask Patty Gasso about this. And credit to her for what she had to say.
Coach, several members of the team attended Riley Gaines' speech earlier this week. She spoke highly of you and then spoke exclusively to the team after that event. Thoughts on her comments and the team's presence at that event?
I did not hear comments, so I can't comment on something I didn't hear. But the fact that our team is there, it's their right, whether they want to go or not. So I support them in whatever they choose.
Good for her. Good for Patty Gasso. She didn't back off anything. She wasn't like, I didn't know anything about it. I'll talk to them. She said, you know what? They're allowed to go to events on campus that you don't like. Little woke reporter boy. They're allowed to go. They're doing it on their own time. I have no comment on it. She defended her players. That's the right thing to do. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of college coaches who wouldn't do that, who wouldn't have their players back in that moment, especially with this specific issue. But credit to her for doing it. Tonight is the national championship game. It is Houston against Florida. Man, good Final Four. It was a lackluster tournament if you like upsets. Great Final Four, 2 second-half comebacks. Houston doing the unthinkable with an 11-1 run to close that game to beat Duke on Saturday night in the second game of the Final Four to get to this championship tonight. Mark, you got a parlay for us, brother, to wrap up the show?
Yes, I got a double up parlay. So this is, you put $10 in, you'll get $20 back. So yeah, it's just a simple double up. I want to be simple for you guys.
Hey,
today.
if I can't double up in the markets, I'll double up on the Parlay Van Sickle pick of the day. What do you got?
All right, so I got Emmanuel Sharp scoring 12 or more points.
He's for Houston.
Walter Clayton of Florida, he's been on a tear. I have him scoring 15 points or more.
Oh, okay.
And then LJ Cryer to score 15 points or more. Those three things.
10 to win 20. Sharp 12. Clayton 15, that's a no-brainer. I mean, the guy put up 34 the other night. If he can't put up 15, they're going to lose by 25 points. And then Cryer at 15. Cryer's been hit or miss, but I did hear in the Sweet 16 game when he struggled against Purdue, he was dealing with the flu.
Yeah, that's the only game he hasn't hit 15 in the tournament.
Yeah, and he was sick that game. So you know what, Mark? Let's buy it, baby.
All right.
Let's go.
I have one more suggestion. If you think Florida's going to win, take Florida money line and the over. If you think Houston's going to win, take Houston money line and the under.
What's the over-under?
140.5 points.
140.5.
So that's
I
my
mean,
other suggestion.
You know, Houston probably wants to play this game in the high 60s, low 70s. That's how they're going to win. If this game gets into the 80s, Florida wins easily.
Yeah.
That's what they want to do. They want to keep this game up tempo. Houston's got the best defensive team in the country. They got to keep this thing in the high 60s to, 70 points, give or take. So that's a good job there, Mark, by you. I like that. Advice for the people.
Yes.
The market swings are continuing. A crazy, crazy morning so far. And Kevin Keatsman will have you covered for the next hour. Have a great Monday. Kevin Keatsman Uncanceled is next on KCMO.